Live from Notre Dame Stadium and the WNDU studios, this is 16 News Now's Countdown to Kickoff.
It's a mostly quiet December day on the Notre Dame campus, but for the first time since 1953, there is still football to be played on this hallowed ground. 67 years to the day after SMU visited, giving Frank Leahy his final Irish victory, Notre Dame finally hosts another home game in the year's 12th month.
And now you are looking live inside Notre Dame Stadium, where today it's SU, not SMU, on the visitor sideline, as an overmatched Syracuse squad takes on the #2 team in the country, the undefeated Fighting Irish of Notre Dame.
Good afternoon and welcome into 16 News Now's Countdown to Kickoff. I'm Mark Skoll Jr.
And I'm WHME Sports Director Chuck Freeby. For the second time in 3 years and for the third time in the last 9, Notre Dame is on the cusp of an undefeated regular season. But let's face it, this one has been different in so many ways. First of all, the Irish have had to navigate a season in the specter of a global pandemic, forcing players, coaches, and staff to take unprecedented precautions on and off the field.
It also meant the schedule the team expected to face in January was a mere semblance of what they actually played. That's because for the first time in its history, Notre Dame football has had to play a conference schedule. Its initial and likely only year in the ACC gave the Irish some tests, but they've passed each one, including a date with #1 ranked Clemson a month ago. All things considered, Brian Kelly may have his best team in a year where they had to be that way.
It's been a crazy experience. I mean, obviously with COVID and all that, but I think it's been so far so great. You know, I'm blessed to even be playing right now, you know, with everything going on. Just to be playing right now is a blessing.
It's crazy because, you know, you come to Notre Dame, you don't think you're going to play in any conference games, nothing. But now look, conference championship for the first time in Notre Dame history and the first time ever in my career. So, you know, this is the goal we as a team we've been preaching on.
It just goes to the mental toughness, the ability to come out week in and week out. You got to have a little luck to stay injury free, right? Again, to achieve at that level at Notre Dame is an amazing feat.
What's also been quite amazing is what the Irish senior class has accomplished since they got to campus, Chuck.
As recruits, they committed to a Notre Dame football program that had just finished the 2016 season 4-8. But since then, they have helped turn this program into a championship contender. For starters, Notre Dame is 42-6 since that 2016 season. The Irish are one win away from an undefeated slate at Notre Dame Stadium for the third consecutive year.
Plus, the Domers are on the doorstep of a second college football playoff appearance in 3 seasons. The turnaround has been quite remarkable, and the seniors say strength and conditioning coach Matt Baelish should get a ton of credit for their success.
After the season, when Baelish came along, I think that was just a big turning point for us because, you know, he brought in a discipline to our team, but also a strength and conditioning and mental side of it too. So I think when we had that new staff and new change, we all knew that, you know, this is a new program and we're going to go somewhere that we haven't been before. And we're going to push ourselves like we haven't pushed ourselves before.
And we've seen these Irish respond to adversity and challenges in a way that, frankly, Notre Dame teams haven't for about a quarter century.
We may not like it, but a lot of Irish fans have kind of gotten used to their team tucking and running when things turn sour. But the response to 2 recent setbacks shows the fight is back in the Fighting Irish.
Definitely. Last year in a monsoon in Ann Arbor, Notre Dame got flat out embarrassed with the eyes of the country watching in prime time. It was the kind of loss normally felt for a long time, maybe even a few seasons. But Notre Dame shook off that disappointment and has gone 15-0 since that night, while Michigan is currently in a tailspin, only winning once in the Big House since.
But you don't have to go back to last year to find a moment that shows maybe these guys are different from their recent Irish forebears. Last Friday at North Carolina, Notre Dame's best player, the safety Kyle Hamilton, got tossed for targeting with the game tied late in the first half. You can forgive yourself if you had a little dyspepsia at that moment. A lot of folks felt their Thanksgiving leftovers churning right then, but the Irish rallied without Hamilton. and dominated the Tar Heels in the second half of that 31-17 win.
And one of the major reasons was how their quarterback played. Ian Book has been superb over the second half of this season, and he led the Irish on massive 97 and 89-yard scoring drives in that second half.
Now, today, he has the chance to set the all-time wins record for a Notre Dame quarterback with number 30. He can also join an elite company of veteran Irish quarterbacks who never lost in this stadium. Tony Rice, Joe Theismann, and the 1947 Heisman Trophy winner, Johnny Lujack.
We have a lot more on Book's stellar season ahead on the countdown, but now let's turn the focus on another Irish offensive star, Kyron Williams.
Let's bring in the countdown to Megan Smedley back in the studio with more about Notre Dame's top dog in the backfield. Megan?
Guys, on Black Friday, all eyes were on the Notre Dame-North Carolina game, including those of LeBron James, who, judging by his tweets, might just be Kyron Williams' newest #1 fan. And it's easy to see why. Williams notched 124 yards against the Tar Heels with 3 touchdowns, including his first career receiving touchdown. But North Carolina isn't an outlier for Williams' production this year. The redshirt freshman has eclipsed 100 rushing yards 5 different times this season. He leads all freshmen in rushing touchdowns and has been named the ACC Running Back of the Week 4 times. Williams says he's built for the hard work.
I'm just trying to keep playing the football that I've been playing since I started playing football. You know, that's just that hard-nosed downhill football, physicality. So no matter what it is, no matter where I'm at, I try to play like that every game, every single down. Talks to like the work I put in through quarantine, the 6 months that we went through away from here, and the dedication. Just made sure that no matter what it was, that if I put this work in, that no one's gonna outwork me.
And all of that hard work is paying off. This week, Williams was named to the Freshman All-American watch list. Now, guys, Kyron was one of the offensive standouts last week, but the Irish also got a big boost from the other side of the ball.
Megan, Kyron Williams was quick to point out this week one reason he has improved his game so much this season, going against the Irish defense every day in practice.
Well, that'll do it. For those of us who watched this program 4 years ago, it's kind of difficult to fathom the turnaround in that unit from one of the nation's worst to one of the best. Notre Dame has been stifling against the run. The 2 top running backs, as rated by Pro Football Focus, are Clemson's Travis Etienne and North Carolina's Javonte Williams. They combined for just 56 yards on 29 carries against the Irish D. Overall, Notre Dame is 5th in rushing defense and 11th in total defense.
So the stats tell one side of the story. The other side is Clark Lee is such a good teacher that his players don't even have to think. They can just go out and play, and that makes a huge difference.
I felt just like I was playing free. I had a lot of fun, and like my reasoning when I look around is to do it for the guys around me, and that really motivated me to want to play my hardest.
When you get 4 seniors playing on a defensive line, it definitely will help. So you understand what's going on, not only what you're doing on a defensive line, but what the linebackers are doing, and also kind of what the corners are doing. So it's important for us to understand the whole defense and play it out.
So in this season full of stars and superlatives, you still have to pick an MVP, and that is your task today in the Lock Monday Auto Group Irish fan poll on WNDU.com.
Right now, 70% of you say veteran quarterback Ian Book is the MVP. 22% vote for star running back Kyron Williams. 3% say it's safety stalwart and leading tackler Kyle Hamilton. And 5% of you pick the second leading tackler, linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. There's still time to vote in the Lock Monday Auto Group Irish fan poll on WNDU.com. We'll have the final results just before 2:20 on the countdown.
Now to Irish injuries. We know that the guard, Tommy Kramer, is still out this week after an appendectomy. He was not listed on the depth chart this week.
And in the last half hour, Notre Dame announced everyone who was on the depth chart this week is good to go today. Some great news. So another home game with no inactives for the Irish. Remarkable after the way this season started.
Now, we are just getting started on the final countdown from Notre Dame Stadium in 2020. Up next, Mike Tarico joins us for another visit. We talk about the crazy couple of weeks he's had leading up to calling today's game.
And here's your first countdown trivia test. We already told you the last December Irish home game was in 1953, but when was the last time Notre Dame played any regular season game in December? The answer when the countdown returns in 2 minutes.
Here is your Countdown to Kickoff trivia answer.
The last time Notre Dame played a regular season game in December, it was also against today's opponent, Syracuse. The Irish made their only trip ever to the Carrier Dome 17 years ago tomorrow. It was not a fun day. Late Syracuse running back Walter Reyes rushed for 189 yards and 5 touchdowns, as Kyron Williams' Irish ended a 5-7 season with a 38-12 loss.
Mike Tarico will be in his regular perch this afternoon right across the way, calling the game for NBC Sports with Tony Junji.
And it marks the end of quite the odyssey for Tarico over the last few weeks. He was good enough to fit us into that very hectic schedule for a countdown conversation.
Mike, it's been a crazy year for everybody, but this past week, especially for you, it's been really hectic with the multiple postponements of the Ravens-Steelers game. What's it been like planning a broadcast during the COVID-19 era we're living in?
Well, the whole year's been different, and this week was the most different of the different, to say the least. I got to Pittsburgh. Oh, my gosh, I need a calendar. Last Tuesday for the Thanksgiving game that got postponed on Wednesday. Fortunately, living in Michigan, I drove back home. So I called my wife. I said, hey, how big a turkey did you buy? She said, why? I said, I just want to make sure there's some for me. It's been a crazy week and a half, but it's been a crazy 11 months and a week. And it's not going to get any simpler for any of us anytime soon.
Of all the different events you've done this year, Mike, what's been maybe the most bizarre or surreal, whether it's with or without fans?
Chuck, it's a good question. I would probably lean towards the Indianapolis 500 with no fans. And maybe because it was my second year, it was the most stark. So go back to 2019, Memorial Day. We're sitting right there past the start-finish line in the Yard of Bricks on the entrance to Turn 1. It's me, Danica Patrick, a set right there, and people everywhere. You can see people as far as you can look. And then to be there in 2020 and be up atop the pagoda and see no one. That was probably the most stark, cold bucket of water over your head that, man, this is different than you ever would have imagined, because it was just a year before that we were around 300,000 people or thereabouts.
And of course, the Olympics are right around the corner. Everyone's excited for the games next year. Do you even begin to plan for the Olympics? And if so, what have the preparations been like?
Absolutely. So not only have we been preparing for the Olympics, and I saw, for example, that earlier this week, the Olympic rings were brought back into the water that fronts the bridge that will be our backdrop for a lot of our Olympic coverage in Tokyo. So just seeing all these little signs and the test events that are going to be in the venues in Tokyo, calendars out for those. So you're hopeful for that. But Mark, we turn around after the summer games, and 180 days later, it's the winter games in Beijing. Oh, wow. So we are honestly doing meetings on the winter games. We are looking at Beijing storylines, then pick up the Tokyo pile and go there. And then, of course, next year we'll have the Tokyo Olympics, the whole football season with Notre Dame and the NFL, into the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is going to happen right around those Beijing Winter Olympics in 2022. So this year was bizarre. Hopefully we get back to some normalcy, because then we're going to have one of the all-time sprints for any of us from, I'd say the PGA Tour Players Championship of 2021 all the way through the Olympics of 2022.
Man, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'll tell you what, Mike Tarico rejoins us with where that Notre Dame-Clemson game stands on the long list of games he's covered. That's in just over 20 minutes on the countdown.
But up next, Tim and Tim join us with how much next week's Wake Forest cancellation helps the Irish as they get ready for a likely rematch with Clemson. It's the Irish Illustrated Report when the countdown returns in 2 minutes. Back live inside Notre Dame Stadium on this first Saturday of December. That's not something we've ever said before on the countdown. Today, the Fighting Irish look to wrap up their third straight perfect season on their home turf.
And this home finale has also turned out to be the last regular season game for the Irish.
Next week's Wake Forest game was canceled to make sure Notre Dame and its two possible ACC championship opponents, Clemson and Miami, each play 9 conference games, not 10.
how that cancellation now affects the Irish is where we start the Irish Illustrated Report.
All right, fellas, I know it's Syracuse week, but next week's game at Wake Forest has already been scrapped, and Notre Dame has clinched a bid in the ACC championship game, giving them an extra week to prepare for it. Tim O'Malley, in what ways does the cancellation help the Irish the most?
Well, I think it helps them more than Clemson, who we assume will be playing. I think Kyron Williams, 150 more carries than we thought he might get when it was July, and we were looking at this football team. The offensive line with injuries to Zeke Correll. As Tim Priestley reported, Josh Lugg is battling a back injury. That's going to help him have a week off to work with that. Tommy Cramley back healthy. I think it really helps Notre Dame because while Clemson was the injured team somewhat coming into November 7th, Notre Dame is probably the more worn down team right now just from what they've had to go through in a really tough November. And I think it's huge that they're off because Wake Forest would make them play. They would beat Wake Forest, but Wake Forest would make them play almost the full 4 quarters, I believe. And this helps Notre Dame going to that ACC championship game.
Priester, let's say loses that ACC championship game. Do they still make the college football playoff?
I think they do. Now, if we're talking about 30-3, like 2 years ago in the Cotton Bowl, that puts a different slant on it. And then you have to factor in the Cincinnatis and the Ohio States and teams like that, which the College Football Playoff Committee is going to have its hands full trying to decipher everything and make a decision that everybody can agree upon. But I think all things being equal, I think Notre Dame's put itself in a position to be included, even if they lose to Clemson. I expect Notre Dame to play competitively. I don't expect anything like 2018. I think Notre Dame makes the playoffs even with a loss to Clemson ACC championship.
O'Malley, we've seen the rumors about Clark Lee to Vanderbilt this week. We've also seen the Vanderbilt AD talk about wanting an offensive-minded coach. I'm going to give you 3 scenarios. I want you to pick which one's going to actually happen. Clark Lee to Vanderbilt, Clark Lee a head coach at another school, Clark Lee stays at Notre Dame.
I think B is the least likely. I think he would take the job, A, if offered. I think Notre Dame fans agree with Vanderbilt's athletic director that they want an offensive coach so they can have Clark Lee back in South Bend. I feel Clark Lee, because I said that because of that comment, I think Clark Lee will be back for another year. I don't think it's a terrible thing if he leaves because being a head coach before coming back and potentially replacing Brian Kelly would be a great thing for Clark Lee. I am not normally the coach in waiting guy at all. Might make an exception with Clark Lee. He's a remarkable coach and he really fits the program. This is a guess. My guess is after those comments that he will end up at Notre Dame for another year, but can't hold on to him forever at this court. He's a guy that deserves to lead a program.
Tim and Tim rejoin us with reasons for the major turnaround the Irish had made since 2016 in just under a half hour on the countdown.
And thanks for asking. You can subscribe to Irish Illustrated. It is the #1 source for Notre Dame sports online. Just head to irishillustrated.com and click on join to find the best plan for you.
Up next, it's the end of an era today in the stadium.
It is the final time Mike Collins will sit behind that PA mic. He looks back on his decades as the voice of the house Rockne built when the countdown returns in 2 minutes. Back on the countdown where the end of the home season means the end of a long run for a game day mainstay here in South Bend, Mike Collins.
The Countdown's Lindsey Stone joins us from campus. And Lindsey, you talked to Mike this week as he gets set for his final game.
Yeah, Mark, if you've attended a home Notre Dame football game in the last 38 years and you have heard the powerful and commanding voice of Mike Collins, he's been announcing Notre Dame football since the 1980s. And today he's getting ready to say a very bittersweet farewell as he prepares for his next game, retirement.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
If you hang around long enough, eventually somebody calls you a legend. And I joke with people and say, legend's often a word interchangeable with old.
Gain of about a yard, 4th down.
Mike Collins is the man behind the voice that's echoed through Notre Dame Stadium since 1982.
It was the first coast-to-coast national broadcast of a college football game other than a bowl game. There I was, having never done a football game before.
You can see all the spacious quarters we have up here, huh, guys?
Gain of about a yard, 4th down.
Game day is serious business for Mike.
Lindsay, don't anyone change my routine. How many people have the opportunity to screw up in front of 80,000 live people in front of you?
Lee Becton and Ray Zellers in the backfield.
After today's home game, Mike will have called 233 straight home football games at Notre Dame.
It's been a long time, 39 years. So yeah, I'm melancholy. I'm going to be sad. When they play the alma mater at the end of the game, I'll cry. But to put that in perspective, I cry at the alma mater when it's played at a wedding.
He says it was a bittersweet decision to retire after this season.
You know, I thought it through, and then, of course, COVID hit afterwards, and I did have some regrets, and I felt like I couldn't change my mind because I'd be going back on my word.
Mike plans to live in Florida with his wife, Melissa, but continue visiting a place that's meant so much to him through the years.
I don't know about going to a game. I think I would stay away for a little bit anyway. Plus, it dawned on me just this week, I won't have tickets.
You can book it.
I'll look back and say, what a ride it was. What a ride. I mean, I had so many highs. It's unbelievable.
What a ride it has been for Mike. Right now, he is in the booth getting ready to announce his final game inside Notre Dame Stadium. What a remarkable career he has had. He says today is emotional, but he's ready. Certainly going to be a very bittersweet farewell to a microphone, a team, and a university that means so much to him.
And no stranger to a microphone, Lindsay. Of course, WNDU viewers remember Mike Collins as an anchor for many years beginning in the 1960s.
Whoever takes that job has some huge shoes to fill. Now, as we approach halftime on the countdown, we want to mark an incredible honor this week for an Irish Hall of Fame coach. Lou Holtz received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in the Oval Office on Thursday.
President Trump called Holtz one of the greatest coaches in American history as he honored the Irish icon with the nation's highest civilian award. Holtz coached 6 college programs, winning 100 games in the 1988 national title here at Notre Dame. He also served as an officer in the Army Reserves for 7 years after graduating from Kent State. The countdown's back with quick hits in 2 minutes.
Live from Notre Dame Stadium and the WNDU studios, this is 16 News Now's Countdown to Kickoff.
The heavy underdog Syracuse Orange have arrived at Notre Dame Stadium for the first time in a dozen years, and the Irish hope to make quick work of their foes from Central New York on their way to a 24th straight win at home, just 4 short of the school record. Back inside the countdown with WHME Sports Director Chuck Freeby, I'm Mark Skoll Jr.
And let's get to some quick hits this afternoon. Lindsay rejoins us for the sprint in a few minutes, but let's lead off with Megan to start our closer look at today's matchup.
These two teams are familiar with each other, meeting just 2 years ago at Yankee Stadium. Syracuse came in at 8-2, ranked 12th in the country. Notre Dame was undefeated and was number 3. But the game was anything but close. Notre Dame steamrolled over the Orange 36-3, outgaining them by more than 200 yards. The Irish defense picked off Syracuse 3 times and took Cue's backup QB Tommy DeVito to the ground 6 times. And what was supposed to be a marquee matchup quickly became a destruction on the diamond. Now, this is not the 2018 Syracuse team. This year, they are at the bottom of the ACC. They are second to last in all of college football in total yards a game, averaging a mere 250 yards. And then there was last week's botched 4th and goal spike to end the game when Syracuse had a chance to nab just their 2nd win of the year. But with all of that being said, Notre Dame is still expecting a feisty Cuse team today.
Syracuse has a great offense. You know, they do a lot of good things right. I mean, they've been in a lot of games for most of the season. So they're a very good team. They play hard. They really go throughout the whistle. They got great receivers who are fast and quick. You know, their O-line is pretty steady at the point of attack. And so they do a lot of great things right on offense.
They play hard on defense. They've got some skilled players on offense. And we'll have to prepare well.
Now, Kelly says they have respect for Syracuse, but that Notre Dame is more focused on building off of its performance from the second half against North Carolina. So, Chuck, you now know what the Irish are thinking. What do the Orange men think of the number 2 team in the country?
Well, Megan, you certainly couldn't blame the Orange if they felt like they were in a room full of juicers today. In fact, most folks expect the Irish to beat the pulp out of them. The Orange are 1-9 on the season. They have an anemic offense and a young defense that's given up at least 30 points 7 times this season. This is really as young as a team you'll see in college football. Syracuse is starting 6 freshmen on defense. 71% of Syracuse's active roster this season is comprised of players in their first 2 years of eligibility. That ranks 4th in the FBS. So you can't blame Dino Babers if the turf below seems like the Green Mile.
You know, you're getting an opportunity to play at Notre Dame and touchdown Jesus in the whole 9 yards. And not only do you get to play, but you get to play like on their TV station. And, you know, it's a big deal. They have an unbelievable history, and they're having a fantastic year. They're leading the ACC right now, and they're at the top. We know where we're at, and we get to lace them up one more time. So if you enjoy playing, this is what games are for. You get an opportunity to do something that a lot of people don't think you can do.
Well, in fact, no one does. Syracuse is a 33-point underdog today. Now, Lindsay, you've got a story of a man who once also wore a different shade of orange and blue on our local high school fields.
Chuck, we know playing college football at an elite level requires a lot of sacrifices both on and off the field. And for Notre Dame walk-on, and as you just mentioned, former Edwardsburg High School football player Cameron Ekanayaka, the sacrifices come easily because he is just as passionate about football as he is his education. The Notre Dame running back and pre-med student was named a finalist for the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship, a highly respected award for students to study at the University of Oxford. While Ekanayaka wasn't chosen for the scholarship, there is still so much to be celebrated surrounding his talent both on and off the field.
When you find things that you're passionate about, sacrificing things to accomplish those things you're passionate about, turn less from sacrifices and more into just steps necessary along the way that you're willing to make. And there's a lot of sacrifices that young football players have to get used to making, especially at a place like Notre Dame.
In his postgraduate studies, Ekanayaka plans to study economics and public health in an effort to serve medical aid to underserved communities. What a remarkable player and person. Mark, I'm talking about someone the Fighting Irish faithful are cheering for, and you're going to tell us about a play that's really been pulling on the heartstrings of the Irish faithful.
That's right, Lindsay. On Thanksgiving morning, Zach Plants, a 2015 Notre Dame grad and the brother of former Notre Dame football players Tyler and Logan, passed away in a car accident. Tyler is currently the assistant director of football operations for the football team, but did not travel to the game against Carolina after his brother's death. However, this team still found a way to honor Zach and let Tyler know they were thinking about him. In his role at Notre Dame, Tyler works closely with offensive coordinator Tommy Rees and the tight end. So for Tyler, Rees called a play with the Irish lined up in 14 personnel, which is a football package with 4 tight ends, 0 wide receivers, and 1 running back. With that formation, the Irish scored on a 1-yard Kyron Williams touchdown run to give Notre Dame a 31-17 lead over the Tar Heels. Brian Kelly says it was a tough weekend for the Notre Dame football family, and they were glad to run a play for Tyler after his brother's death.
Was devastating to everybody that is part of this football family. To lose somebody that's part of your football family that close to the game was something that we needed to talk about and address. After the game, we were able to do that and pray for the family in a very, very difficult time.
Zach Plants was actually raising money for mental health before he had passed away. He had raised $1,000. Since his death, that amount now exceeds $127,000. He's being laid to rest today and leaving an incredible legacy from a man gone way too soon.
Well, there's another member of the Notre Dame football family who will be on a lot of minds today. Today is the first Irish home game since Paul Hornung died. The 1956 Heisman Trophy winner passed away November 13th in his hometown of Louisville. The College and Pro Football Hall of Famer was quite simply one of the best to ever put on a helmet and pads. The Golden Boy was 86.
Up next on the Countdown, we continue our conversation with Mike Tarico as he ranks where the ND Clemson game stands on events he has called.
And here is another Countdown trivia question. When was the last time Notre Dame finished the regular season at home? The answer when the Countdown rolls back in 2 minutes.
Here is your Countdown to Kickoff trivia answer.
The last time Notre Dame finished the regular season at home was a game most Irish fans would rather forget. November 20th, 1993, against Boston College. That's the day Tom Coughlin's Eagles upset number 1 Notre Dame with a last-second David Gordon field goal, ruining a perfect season and a chance at a still elusive 12th national title.
Of course, that BC game came just 1 week after the Florida State win, the last time Notre Dame beat number 1, that is, until the Irish took down Clemson last month.
And with that Clemson Classic still fresh on many of our minds, that's where we pick up our countdown conversation with Mike Tarico.
You've been having the opportunity to go to so many great events over the years. I just wonder, that last Notre Dame football game that you had the chance to call with Clemson, where does that rank up in the broadcast events that you've had?
Oh, that's right up there near the top. There's no doubt about it, because of what Clemson has been coming in as the number 1 team, knowing that very rare that you get a number 1 team come to South Bend against an Irish team that is in the top 10. So, I mean, for a stadium that's had so many games over all of these years, it was one of the very rare days that you had all of that come together. And that's a generational game. We will talk about that for so long. The pandemic, so many people weren't there, so many people were watching. When my kids are in their 50s and they're asked about Notre Dame football, and they talk about Notre Dame football, say, oh, remember the Clemson game in 2020? The double overtime and the pandemic, and they rushed the field, the whole deal. That was one of those nights that will live on forever in the lore of the college football program that has the greatest history to tell. So, yeah, it's forever going to be right up there. It was a memorable night for sure.
Really incredible night, awesome night. I'm sure Notre Dame fans will never forget that. Mike, you've been calling Notre Dame football games for several years now. Is this the best Irish team you've ever covered, and what makes them stand apart from the rest?
It's nice to answer a question without having a waffle. Absolutely. This is my 5th year of having the chance to be a part of this package, 4 full seasons. It's clearly the best team. And I think where you look at it is the depth. Up until this point, Notre Dame and Alabama have been the 2 best and most consistent programs in the country. And that says it all. Because Alabama is the measuring stick for this decade, Clemson the last half decade. And this Irish team, and I'm going to give credit in a couple of places. It starts with Brian Kelly, the ability to hit the reset button after the 4-8 season, not just philosophically, but inwardly figure out what's the best way to be a CEO coach in 2020, 2019. Full marks for that. So impressed with that. Obviously, hiring coordinators who get a lot of ability to do what they do well and are crushing it. Man, it's been great to watch, and it's clearly the best Notre Dame team that we've seen, and not just in my 5 years, but in the last at least 15 years or so.
I know you always appreciate coming here with Tony and doing the games, but it's got to be special for a proud member of the Syracuse class of '88 to come in here this weekend and call alma mater again. I know it's not the first time you've called an Orange game, but how special is it when you get a chance to call the school you went to?
Well, I'm not going to give their record at any point during the game. Is that fair? No, I'm just joking. Yeah, it is cool. My friend Scott Van Pelt does a great job at ESPN. I borrow this line all the time, and I love it. We're all from somewhere. And my somewhere as a college student is Syracuse. I met my wife there. We got married on campus. I love that school. Yeah, it'll be a special Saturday for sure. It'll be a lot of fun. It'll be one that I will cherish forever, to be a part of seeing the school that helped make you who you have become on the biggest stage in college football at Notre Dame Stadium.
Back inside the countdown, where Ian Book has said he's been staying off Twitter until the season is over, but that doesn't mean he doesn't hear the chatter. He's been an underdog for much of his career, and even on the verge of history, he's not slowing down.
Playmaker. Playmakers make plays.
That's exactly what Ian Book has done in the second half of this season. His 2020 started slow. Through 4 games, Book completed 61.7% of his passes, averaged 179 yards a game, and threw just 3 touchdowns. But after the Louisville game, wide receiver Ben Skoranek says Book was frustrated and pushed himself to be better. And boy, has it been working. In the last 5 games, Book's completion rate has ticked up to 64%. His average passing yards a game have gone up by nearly 100 yards, and he's tripled his touchdowns.
At the end of the day, I'm having fun out here playing college football. It's a dream come true. I feel fortunate to be here. We're 9-0.
But what's also fueling Book? Skeptics. After last week's victory over North Carolina, head coach Brian Kelly brought up a published list of the top 10 quarterbacks in college football, with Book nowhere to be found.
He's got a little fuel. He's got a little chip on his shoulder as well. And He won the matchup tonight.
Look, I don't know who's writing those. So have they played football or not? I'm not sure. It's just part of it. There's a ton of articles out there that say a lot of bad things about Notre Dame. It's motivating. So shoot, I think I'm, top 10 and want to be, and want to compete every day to be like that. So at the end of the day, it just fills the fire.
And slowly but surely, Book is getting nationwide attention. This week, he was named to this year's class of the Davey O'Brien National Quarterback Award.
If you're a Notre Dame fan, you got to be proud of the way he's really developed and grown. Mental toughness is clearly a great attribute of his.
He doesn't get the kind of credit that he deserves. He's a college football quarterback that wins football games, and we try to make too much out of it other than he's a winner.
Book's a winner, all right. He's about to become Notre Dame's winningest quarterback with just one more win.
Wow. Right? I mean, pretty good. I'd like that on my resume. To achieve at that level at Notre Dame is an amazing feat. We're going to make sure he gets to that.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's a dream come true. Just landing, at Notre Dame and playing here, and it's an unbelievable team. I love these guys so much. Couldn't do it without them, and we got some more games we got to win.
Now, Brian Kelly joked that with this record, Ian Book might just get himself a gig on a pregame show in a couple of years, but Book is not taking our jobs anytime soon. He's got a more immediate target. He can capture his 30th win as a starter if Notre Dame can take down Syracuse this afternoon. Up next, Mark and Chuck rejoin us from the stadium in 2 minutes on the countdown.
Here are the final results of this week's Lock Monday Auto Group Irish fan poll on WNDU.com.
We asked you, who is Notre Dame's 2020 MVP? 70% of you voted for Ian Book. 22% say it's Kyron Williams. Kyle Hamilton got 3% of the vote, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah got 5%. Thank you for voting in the Lock Monday Auto Group Irish fan poll on WNDU.com.
4 years ago, those four were an unheralded fourth-string freshman and 3 high school kids.
Boy, have things changed for them and for the team they now star on, and that's where we pick up the Irish Illustrated Report.
Now, Tim Priester, 4 years ago, Notre Dame was 4-8. Since then, the Irish are 42-6. First off, did you think a turnaround like that was possible? And second off, what made it possible?
How do you imagine 42-6? Unless you're Alabama and Clemson, that doesn't happen very often. You go back to the Lou Holtz days when it happened at Notre Dame. So 42-6 is pretty extreme. How it happened, I give a lot of credit. I give basically all the credit to two people in particular. It's Jack Swarbrick having the patience to not pull the trigger on firing Brian Kelly, which a lot of people wanted. And then I give Brian Kelly all the credit for changing who he was. People talk about the purple-faced Brian Kelly on the sideline. That was 100 years ago now. He changed his persona with his players, the way he carries himself, the way he handles himself on the sideline during a game. Players were tuning him out. They don't tune him out anymore now because he's one of them. They've accepted him.
It's really been a remarkable turnaround. Now, Tim O'Malley, take us back 4 years ago to that recruiting class. Was that expected, and do we put too much value into how many stars a recruit has and not as much into position coaching?
Well, we definitely put too much value into how many stars one recruit has. In other words, if you're going to judge one player by his stars, it's a crapshoot. However, it's better to have 10 5 stars than it is to have 10 4 stars than it is to have 10 3 stars. But those are separate arguments. That class is the 42-6 class, if you think about that, those freshmen coming in. And they have gotten so much mileage from the lower-rated guys. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Kurt Heinisch. These are players that are national championship-level players. It's a unique class, and it's one Notre Dame fans are always going to remember.
Tim Priester, this is a short and simple question, but I don't think it's a short and simple response. Who's the Irish MVP in 2020?
Oh, boy. The two best players with the greatest future, of course, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And Kyle Hamilton. MVPs, I'm kind of torn. I'm going to split it, or I'll say that they'll share it. Notre Dame is not in this position if Ian Book suddenly doesn't take the step up against Clemson and what he's done the last 3 weeks, even going on the road to North Carolina. If Ian Book's playing the way he did his first 29 starts, I'm not sure that they necessarily come out of that with a victory, but he's got to share it with the offensive line. This offensive line has been spectacular.
Now we got score predictions. Tim O'Malley, we'll start with you. What's going to happen on Saturday?
Yeah, I think the only thing that keeps this score down a little for Notre Dame is the need to stay healthy. to get Kyron Williams some rest, to get the offensive linemen that are healthy some rest. So you may see by the last drive of the third quarter a whole new look offensive line. So I am keeping it in the 41-6 range, maybe as low as 35-6.
TP, what about you?
Yeah, I think, certainly there are reasons for Notre Dame not to be at its peak for this game. Senior day sometimes contributes to that. Syracuse is bad, man. I'm telling you, this is a bad football team. The biggest disparity is they can't convert on third down. They're 124th in the country, and Notre Dame doesn't let anybody convert on third down. They're third in the country defensively. So I see a little bit lower scoring. I definitely like the under here. I'm right around O'Malley's number. I'm taking Notre Dame 38-6 over Syracuse.
And you can subscribe to Irish Illustrated. It's the #1 source for Notre Dame sports online. Just head to irishillustrated.com and click on join to find the best plan for you.
Up next, it's the Four Winds Casino. What to watch for in 2 minutes on the countdown. Back on the countdown, Megan rejoins us for the Four Winds Casino. What to watch for. We start with keys to the game. Mark.
You got to get everyone reps today. I think everyone needs to get a chance to play in this one, including the walk-ons. Megan?
I got to say, you got to stay healthy. We saw back in the Pitt game, Braden Lindsey went down with a hamstring injury late in the fourth quarter when he shouldn't have even been in the game to begin with. Can't have that heading into the ACC championship. Chuck.
Line domination. I know they've got to put some pieces together on the O-line today. They're banged up, but you should still be able to dominate Syracuse. Prediction time, Mark.
I heard Syracuse has a good kicker, so I think they get 2 field goals. Notre Dame wins easily, 45-6. Megan?
I don't know if they get that much. I don't see a 50-burger coming either from Notre Dame. I think it's 42-3 Notre Dame. Chuck.
I'll give the Cuse a touchdown, and that's about it. 42-7 Notre Dame wins. We want to thank an engineer that's been with WNU for 33 years. This is his final countdown today. Our thanks to Rudy Sawasinski on a job well done over the years. And now we turn it over to Mike Tarico and Tony Dungy for NBC Sports coverage of the Irish and the Orange. We're back right after the game with highlights and reaction on 16 News Now.